Get ready to sell some of your crypto. And no, I'm not kidding. You see, while markets are approaching 45K with this Sanders rally, there is one thing that nobody wants to admit and that nobody seems to want to talk about. It's time to discover crypto. So as you guys know, there is an anticipation that a lot of analysts believe we are going to see the approval of a Bitcoin spot ETF approved with a chance of 90% on January 10th of 2024. This comes from a Bloomberg analyst by the name of Eric Balchunas, who has been calling this since October 12th of 2023. This prediction is along James Seyffert, who obviously is going viral on Twitter, and they are pulling millions of views in the anticipation of this approval. Now, as much as I would love a Bitcoin spot ETF to approve, I do not believe this is going to happen. In fact, I think it's a 90% chance that we see a denial around January 10th. And that's because of this chart right here. As you can see, ARK21 shares Bitcoin, the second one, has a final deadline of January 10th, which is why they believe they're going to see a mass influx and approval of all of the following ETFs at the same exact time. Now, Eric and James are really prominent analysts. They are really good at their jobs. But the approval of the spot ETF is completely based off speculation, which means they could very well be wrong. And they already have been in the past. You see, on August 29th, they were actually predicting there was a 75% chance that Bitcoin ETFs would launch actually this year. Now, they've bumped that to January 10th with a 90% rate. But a lot of things have happened since then that make me think the SEC is just going to deny this and more than likely take the lawsuit that they would face. The first one being what happened in October with the SEC's deadline on Grayscale's Bitcoin ETF trust. You see, what was much anticipated by markets as a conversion for the Grayscale ETF to a Bitcoin spot ETF, of course, ended with the SEC making no decision at all. And this comes, of course, after the SEC filed 13 charges against Binance and CZ. Charges included operating an unregistered exchange, broker-dealers and clearing agencies, and misrepresenting trading controls and oversight on the Binance.US platform. Now, while the takedown of Binance barely had an effect on the market, it's very clear the SEC is going to use this and could use this against court in the decisions of approving an ETF because they're looking for a potential FTX-style fraud at Binance.US. If you didn't notice, these three-letter agencies often work very closely together. And I don't think the timing of the takedown of Binance and CZ from the DOJ was at all a coincidence. Because while all of this is happening, guess who's meeting with the SEC on almost a weekly basis? This week, we've had Grayscale Investments meet up with the SEC, discussing the listing of their Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. On November 28th, they met with BlackRock, who has met with them multiple times now, where BlackRock just pitched an entirely new presentation and revised the model on what a spot ETF would look like and how it would operate. Now, I don't need to get into the technicals, but what all this means, guys, is I believe the SEC can very well use the takedown of Binance and CZ to approach the court with the idea that there is corruption and market manipulation with the markets and that they need more time before they approve some of these ETFs. After all, ARK21 shares Bitcoin is the only one that will be getting the final deadline on the 10th of January. After that, it jumps to March 14th with Bitwise and March 15th with, of course, BlackRock's iShare Bitcoin's trust. All the SEC need is reasonable deniability of actually pushing through the trust. And they could go to the court and yes, ARK could sue the SEC, but ultimately could just be like, hey, there was a massive takedown of the largest exchange in the markets and they are being taken down for market manipulation and everything they need to deny a Bitcoin ETF. And I think it's just very convenient that BlackRock and Grayscale, which already, of course, attacked the SEC, is now working with the SEC to restructure their trusts and the launch of these ETFs coming into Q2 of next year. Now, of course, I could be wrong about this, guys. We could get the approval of an ETF in the first week of January. And I would be 100% stoked, but I've been dollar cost averaging the entire bear market, and I bought on the day FTX collapsed. And then with CZ tweeting about DeSci just the last week, we've seen 20Xs in some of these small altcoins. So we're taking profits. We're getting ready and we're proactively preparing ourselves for a potential pullback. And this is what I think a pullback could do. I am looking at the $34,800 zone. Now, this chart looks like a bunch of colors, but it's very, very basic, okay? The purple lines are support and resistance, and the yellow lines are stronger support and resistance. Now, I've used this chart for a very long time, and traditionally, markets always come back to the imbalances or those levels at the yellow line. Looking at Picasso's chart here, don't get scared, don't run away. We don't need to pay attention to any of this in front of us. We want to look to the left-hand side. And what you'll notice is these bright yellow lines. The brighter the color, the more of the liquidations that exist in that range. You can see we have a decent amount starting to push up to $42K, even up to $45,000, and we have a decent amount stacking below us right above $36,500. And we are in an uptrend. Most definitely, we are in an uptrend. Everybody, all these influencers are anticipating the approval of this ETF. And as someone that has years of experience in this and that has been buying and hasn't stopped making content this entire bull run, I promise you the cockroach influencers of the industry that ran for the hills during the bear market because they were scared, they're going to come back at $40,000 Bitcoin and start pumping the markets again. They're going to be, oh, we're back in a bull run. Buy, 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 buy. And even though cryptos are already up 10, 20x, they're going to be telling you that these top 100 cryptos can make you millionaires if you play the game right. And it's like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm sorry, but a top 100 altcoin is not going to 700x. So what I believe is going to happen is we're going to get the Santa rally. We're going to see a lot of bullish price action moving into December. I don't know if we're going to go to 45K or even 55K. I do believe markets are in this uptrend and people are going to start FOMOing in as they anticipate the approval of that ETF in the first week of January. And that's where I'm going to take profits. I'm not going to sell out of all my positions, but I am up massively. It will probably be upwards of 40 to 50% of my portfolio where I take profits on the way up on this cycle. Because from my perspective, there's only one of two things that can happen. Either this gets denied and we see a pretty significant retracement going from that 45K back to the mid 30s, which obviously, even though that would be a pretty detrimental move on Bitcoin, that would make altcoins crash by 30, 40% very easily. And even if they do get approved, I've been in this market for so long at this point that we would be in so much profit. I would be doing what I would anticipate would be the same thing of the gold-based ETF that was launched in 2004. Buy the rumor, sell the news. Do you remember? The gold-based ETF in the United States, we're looking at the gold chart right here, was launched in November of 2004. And of course, guys, the day it was launched, gold with a $3 trillion market cap saw $300 billion with a B leave the market in the next coming weeks in a 10% drawback, before consolidating and moving onto the bull run where it went up for like a 400% gain. And that's because the market was heavily manipulated by the institutions and regulators in the early 2000s and the 1990s. And I'm sorry, I don't believe that Jamie Dimon and this financial cartel just periodically turned into good people over the last decade and a half. They are going to take advantage of retail investors. They always do, always have, and always will. Which is why I expect something like this to occur. When we get a very bullish month, we start consolidating, moving higher, pinching forward as the approval gets near. And as soon as it's denied, we see a bit of a retracement, which, guys, would be extremely healthy for the market. And like I said, I don't know if it'll be 45K or 55K, but I am expecting a pretty significantly pullback, which would bring us back to the mid to high $30,000 range. If I'm wrong, great. I've made tens of thousands of dollars in this bull run just off my investments alone. The other 50% will continue higher. But if I'm right, then me taking profits will allow me to capitalize off a healthy retracement in this market that was expected just based off the psychology in the markets, as I believe we will then break out after the Bitcoin halving, after BlackRock gets their ETF approved before or around the March 15th area. But let me know in the comments, do you believe this market's up only, or are we due for a retracement? And do you believe that the approval of the spot Bitcoin ETF will happen in the first week of January?